April 1818. Sapphira Beresford loved this time of year. Winter's gloom forgotten under sunny skies, the mild air perfumed with heady blossoms, myriad colours festooned the trees, and flowers carpeted the parks. More exciting, this spring, in fact this very day, she was getting married. She stood by the open window and stared out over the beautiful vista, her thoughts meandering like the path weaving its drunken way to the orchards. At 22, Sapphira was among the last of her friends to wed, in the main because her betrothed had only recently reached his majority, a detail stipulated to in the formal arrangement drawn up between their respective families 2 decades previously. Jeremy Fitzalan, an earl no less, was quite dreamy really, slightly taller than she, an important trait when you're reasonably tall yourself, with fair hair and velvety brown eyes. They had been friends all their lives, and Sapphira could not recall a time when Jeremy wasn't there. Was she in love with him? A question she mused on frequently, without ever coming to a satisfactory answer. They liked each other. He was an agreeable companion and treated her with respect. There was no indication he was cruel or boorish, or would ignore her the minute they signed the register. What more could she ask for? Mutual kindness, consideration and gentle affection. To Sapphira it felt like love, ignoring the obscure restlessness teasing at her subconscious. Turning away from the pretty view across the garden, she looked at her gown. It was a vision in the palest blue, elegant and not too fussy. She detested clothes adorned with bows and lace and ribbon. Walking over to where it hung on the door of the armoire, she stroked her fingers over the silk. Underneath, a costly indulgence, as it was unlikely they would last the day, a pair of low-heeled shoes in matching blue silk, the criss-cross pattern over the toe woven in a darker hue and trimmed with a jewel-encrusted buckle. She had to admit they were perfect. A prickle of something akin to unease ran down her spine. Of late, Jeremy had been distracted, distant. She had ascribed it to pre-wedding jitters, and when challenged, Jeremy had laughed and told her she was imagining things. "He's correct, my girl. Pull yourself together," she admonished herself. Alice, her personal maid, came through the door carrying a pile of delicate undergarments, effectively diverting Sapphira's doubts. The arduous task of dressing for her wedding began. The congregation at the church was abuzz. Where was Lord Jeremy? His parents were here, as was his older brother and his family, but of Lord Fitzalan, Earl of Brunswick, there was no sign. Fans were opened or hats lifted the better to mask concerned mutterings. The clatter of horses drawing a carriage produced an immediate silence. With bated breath they waited. Was this the tardy gentleman? Sapphira and her father, the Earl of Templeton, appeared, silhouetted in the arched doorway. A collective gasp, then a sigh rippled through the church. "Papa, something's wrong. Look at their expressions," Sapphira murmured. Everyone was staring at her as though she'd grown an extra head. Her gaze travelled around the church, coming to a dead stop when she realised that where her betrothed ought to be waiting was conspicuously empty. Her father patted her hand. "Nothing to fret about, my dear." He motioned to the vicar, who hurried towards them. "Where is Lord Brunswick?" Sapphira hissed in undertones. "We thought you were he," the vicar replied less than coherently. "What I mean is, we supposed the carriage that just arrived to be bearing him, not you," he qualified. Sapphira fidgeted. That same curious foreboding reared its ugly head. What if? A sneaking suspicion pestered and pestered until she allowed it to form. He would not be so crass as to actually leave her at the altar, would he? Surely he was simply late. Her heart raced. A hot flush surged through her, followed by a chill icier than a December frost. The vicar was speaking again, but his words were distorted, and sounded as though they were coming from a great distance. She crumpled onto one of the stone benches set against the walls of the ornate porch, the cold from the unyielding slab seeping through her finery. "Sapphy! Sapphy!" Her father's voice penetrated the whooshing in her ears. A fan was wafted in front of her, the snap of air welcome. Closing her eyes, she forced the turbulence in her head to settle, and strove to salvage her composure. "I cannot believe he would treat me thus," she croaked. "Come, Poppet, let us go home. You look in need of a stiff brandy," her father coaxed. Despite the humiliation of her current situation, Sapphira felt a grin twitch at her lips. Papa's answer to all troubles was a stiff brandy.